Okay, quick intro today. We have a lot of fun with the Ringer's Brian Barrett, who is back from Off the Pike podcast. We did a little home and home action, so you'll hear us go back and forth about me being on his show, and obviously he's on today. Before we get to that, first of all, hope everyone had a lovely holiday weekend. Second of all, there's been a lot of smaller news up until today, Tuesday. Players are off. Drake Maye spoke yesterday. We heard from a couple players in the locker room. They practice. Wednesday, tomorrow, is the real, okay, this counts now. They're going to have practices, meetings. We're in a regular season style schedule for the next 18 weeks. That's it. This is awesome. This is where we want to be. As far as the little news, though, it's worth saying we have 6 captains now. Jacoby Brissett, David Andrews, Juwan Bentley, Dietrich Wise, Jabril Peppers, Joe Cardona. Half those guys are new captains. Cool. But Aaron Lowe, City So, still missing practice. Not cool. So the Patriots offensive line is in flux. I will not have a full deep dive game preview until later this week, when we will be in our regular season style schedule, talk about film reviews on Monday nights, and then a preview either recorded Thursday in the afternoon or Friday in the morning. Friday, I will also have more of a season style preview. So a big, long episode for you. Plus, Jonathan Jones is going to come back for a 4-minute drill. If you've been enjoying those, please let me know. If you'd like to see them changed up, also please let me know, which gets me to my final point. Ratings and reviews, baby. Keep them coming. It's been really helpful, good and bad, to bring the best out of the show of what could be, as we know, a difficult Patriots season, but that's not going to stop us. So more guests, more 4-minute drills, more player content, more bold predictions, which are coming up now, and that'll do it for me. So I will see you in a couple of days. Not much going on for now, so let's fill it with some of the best stuff of the summer. Football's almost here, but football predictions are here. Okay, it is time. It is everyone's favorite time. And I'm not talking about post-Labor Day. I'm not talking about leaves falling. I'm not even talking about football being here. I'm talking about football almost being here. Bold predictions, SZN season. And with us for more bold predictions, we have the Ringer's Brian Barrett, the Off the Pike podcast. Here's the deal. Brian has 4. I have 4. We're going to alternate. I'm going to do a couple of live ad reads. And by the end, you will have had so much goodness, so much football prognostication and forecast, and things will have blown your mind. You will be trying to listen to this again. Brian, are you ready to live up to that promise that people are instantly going to re-listen to this podcast with all the boldness and all the predictions that we're about to deliver?
I am ready. I am able. I'm going to try to mix in some positive ones here too, because I know most of the offseason and the training camp and the preseason has been negative with the Patriots. So I'll try to mix in some positive ones too.
Good, excellent. I will do the same, because I plotted this out where you got 2 more realistic ones, 2 that are a little bit more optimistic, that say I've snorted a little bit too much at the bold predictions here, but that's what we're here for, and we're going to waste no more time. I want your spiciest, your boldest, your what the hell did I just say prediction off the top about the 2024 Patriots.
Okay, that's tough to narrow down, but I'm going to go with this one because I don't think most people think this. I think the defense is going to be below average this season.
Oh.
So there's a couple of reasons for this. Okay, you look back to last year and you're like, what are you talking about? They were 5th in points per drive. They were 3rd in yards per drive. They were 5th in plays per drive. And all this was when your opponent had the best field position in the NFL because the offense was so bad, right? And I also don't expect the offense to be very good, as I think nobody expects the offense to be good. They were also 7th in success rate, 8th in EPA per play. But here's the thing. The Patriots last season, 19th in pressure percentage. They were 27th in sacks, and they were just 31st in quarterback knockdowns. And all of this was with blitzing at the 4th highest rate in the NFL. And despite all that, they still had a good defense. But Christian Barmore, unfortunately, dealing with this blood clot situation right now. He led your team last year with 8.5 sacks. You say, well, you get Judon back. No, he's in Atlanta. And I'm not relitigating the trade. I totally understand why they did it. But the point being is the guy that you penciled in to be your pass rusher is no longer here. Uche, without Judon, took a massive step back. Remember, 2 years ago, unbelievable numbers, double-digit sacks to last year only having 3 sacks. So I guess what you're depending on from a pass rush perspective would be a huge year from Keon White in year 2, and maybe he's the breakout guy, and maybe he takes care of the pass rush, and maybe Uche is that secondary guy. But Uche, if you're game planning for him, I don't think he's going to be very effective. And then I look at this, Callahan. Patriots schedule, Joe Burrow to start the season. Then it's Geno Smith. And here's some numbers on this. Geno Smith, when kept clean last year, 8.4 yards per attempt, 7th best. Okay, then it's Aaron Rodgers, who's won a couple of MVPs. Week 4, you play the Niners. Brock Purdy, when he was kept clean, first in the NFL in yards per attempt. Miami, Tua kept clean, fourth best in yards per attempt. Houston, Stroud, third best in yards per attempt. So your first 6 games, guys, when they're kept clean, 3 out of the top 5 in the NFL. Geno Smith at 7th. And then you have Aaron Rodgers and you have Joe Burrow in there. And by the way, we'll see what happens with this T. Higgins situation. You look at I love Christian Gonzalez, but you look at his sort of the schedule he has to go through. We'll see with Jamar Chase, but if he's not there, it's T. Higgins. And we'll see what happens here in Cincinnati. But Metcalf, Garrett Wilson, who had over 1,000 yards with the combination that they had in New York last year, which is an amazing feat. Like, he should have won some award for that. Brandon Ayuk, Tyreek Hill. Okay, like that is a bear of a schedule. So I look at that. It's going to be tough to creep back toward average after you play all these teams.
I promised at the beginning people would be re-listening. I think we've lost everyone. I think they're gone. I think they're fully depressed. They were ready to soak in the boldness and the goodness, and that was plenty bold. That was a first sip of coffee that has you running to the bathroom immediately, venti bold, whatever, from Starbucks, and that's where we're going. But I appreciate the predictions, the context, and you've lived up instantly to the nickname, a metric man. Do you firmly believe this, though? Like, do you, given everything that happened last year, I know the blitzing and the numbers and all that, but like, given the talent, everything that came back, most of the defensive staff is still back. Do you really think this is going to happen?
Well, it's also based on the schedule that they have, the opponents that they have. So let's say
But they had the hardest schedule in the league last year, too, and then things ended up defensively being okay.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a fair point. I just look at it and I say I could easily see them starting the season 1-5, which I think is a realistic outcome. And some of these teams putting up really good numbers against the Patriots defense, which I think by the end of the year could skew it. I'm not saying they're going to be like 28th or 27th in defense, anything along those lines. I'm just saying my case is that they're 17th in defense rather than 8th or 7th in defense, depending on what metric you use. Like, I could easily see them being an above average defense for the second half of the season, but for the first half of the season, especially not knowing when Barmore is going to step back on the field, which I think in terms of the guys up front, he's the one guy you have to game plan for, right? Like, Barmore was going to be that guy that I think was going to have, he was awesome, especially down the stretch of last season, the reason they gave him the extension. But up front on that, save the defensive line, pass rushers, etc., who do you really have to game plan for? Like, not right now, Keion White. Maybe Keion White becomes that player. But we saw Uche last year without Judon. He wasn't very effective. That's why I just think, like, and maybe Mayo and Covington can draw things up. But also remember this. I know that Mayo did a ton of the game planning last year. But you also are losing. Like, we can say whatever we want about Belichick from a GM standpoint. The offense clearly taking a step back year after year. They always had like pretty good game plans, I would say, Callahan, right? And Steve Belichick is a good play caller, right? So I do think you have to factor those things into the equation as well. So I think it's here for a bold take, but if they finish 17th in defense, I'm not going to be surprised whatsoever. And I'm going to look back and I'm going to listen back to this pod and I said, I told you so. I predicted this.
Okay. Very good. I think solid points. I'm gonna bring us up here now. Here's my number one spiciest take on this list. The Patriots in late November are going to travel down to Miami. They're going to win the game. They're going to come back home with the rare win in Miami, something Brady and Belichick couldn't do more than half the time, something that hasn't been done since 2019. More recently, Cam Newton and Mac Jones and now Jacoby Brissett, Bailey Zappi somewhere in there, obviously. But here's the case. By then, the last weekend before Thanksgiving, Drake Maye should have had about 3 to 5 starts by now. Okay, he'll be accustomed to the offense, the in-season routine. Your teammate at the Ringer, Ryan Russillo, did a really good breakdown of it. Even the guys who sit or are scheduled to sit as first-round rookie quarterbacks end up averaging 10 to 11 starts. Okay, by the time we get to November, this will be somewhere in the double digits, week 10, 11, 12. He'll have gotten multiple starts by then. Drake Maye is someone who can create on his own, not only throw off platform, but scramble, and will be facing a defense that the Patriots have already prepared for in week 5, as you mentioned, when you expect Tua to be very cozy and maybe pitch a 10 in the pocket because he'll have so much time against this defense that doesn't have any pass rushers. Also, speaking of Tua, since he took over as a starting quarterback of Miami, the Dolphins have averaged just 21 points per game against the Patriots in 7 games. Now, that includes the Patriots only win during that time when Tua didn't even play. Teddy Bridgewater was in. It was the last home game in 2022. Patriots playoff hopes were still alive because they won 23-21. But in these games, the Patriots have lost a lot of close contests to the Dolphins. They've suffered multiple defensive scores. And I think if you just clean that up and get to 21 points here against a team that you'll have already seen once, you'll probably have a different quarterback for them to prepare for, a better, more talented one. And not to mention, again, as you said, the defensive staff is in place. Tyreek Hill had his worst game of the season last year against the Patriots. They'll be equipped better in late November than I think they've been in recent years, which again, it's Miami. It's not saying much, but the Patriots are going to go down to Miami. And this will be, because I've been predicting this for weeks, their win over a playoff team in 2024, just like every other team to pick number one in the draft has before them. Who knows what they'll pick? But I think this is their upset. Divisional opponent, late in the season, new quarterback, good defense. It all comes together in South Florida.
I like it. And I will add to your point, we have no evidence that Tyreek Hill can play well against Christian Gonzalez. We have no evidence of it. We only have
a beautiful one-game sample, but yes.
Yeah, we only have evidence of it was his least productive game of the season last year. And Gonzalez had that unbelievable interception, too, where he came off his defender and picked off Tua. So I like that. Going down to Miami and picking up a win. So for my next one, I'll piggyback off that because you had the Drake Maye or the Patriots winning that game. So I'll do a Drake Maye thing here. To go with the Dolphins theme too, my next bold take is Drake Maye will start against the Dolphins on October the 6th. Okay. So here's my rationale for this. Brissett is getting at least 2 games for sure. We know that. But you look at weeks 3 and 4. The Jets and the Niners, both 2 teams that were top 10 in the NFL last year, defensive EPA per play. The Jets were 3rd. The Jets have one of the best defenses from a personnel perspective. And I would even say you could look at the San Francisco defense and say, I know they went all the way to the Super Bowl, that they underachieved numbers-wise, right? They replaced their defensive coordinator. So I think that Niners defense could be even better. You look at the Dolphins, they lost Wilkins. They were 15th in EPA per play, so they were like an average defense. Texans after that, 14th. They did add Danielle Hunter, which of course adds to their defense. And they have a really good defensive coach in D'Amico Ryans. And the Jags, 13th. But I think that Dolphins opportunity at home, right, is an opportunity where after Jacoby Brissett struggles, because I think he will in the first month of the season. Some interesting things on Brissett when he was pressured in 2022. This unbelievable year with Alex Van Pelt where they won games together. They won 4 games, but it was so good together, right? I mean, that's what Van Pelt has told us. They won some games together. That year when he was pressured, 26 of 40 qualifiers in completion percentage when pressured. His passer rating was 33rd. And when he was trailing in games in 2022, his passer rating was 76. Callahan, there were 2 quarterbacks that attempted 100 passes when they were trailing that were worse than him.
Can I guess?
Mike, yeah, go ahead.
Mike White was my first guess.
Yep. Who's your second?
So 2022. So my first thought ran to Zach Wilson, but if Mike White was eating into those snaps, it's not going to be Zach Wilson. Give me Russell Wilson?
Nope.
Who was it?
Kenny Pickett.
Okay.
So, I mean, give him credit. He was better than Kenny Pickett, and he was better than Mike White when he was trailing in those games. And of note, and I get this is at the collegiate level, okay? But PFF tracks big-time throws, which basically means more throws that are down the field and into tighter windows. When he had more than 2.5 seconds, Drake Maye last year had the most big-time throws in the country. And guess who had the most big-time throws in that particular category, more than 2.5 seconds last year in the NFL? I'll give you a hint. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and it's not Mahomes.
CJ Stroud.
Close. Josh Allen. So, and May 2 years ago at the collegiate level ran for over, I don't know why I keep saying the collegiate level rather than at UNC. He ran for over.
Adding a year to your age every time you do.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when you hear Hubie Brown say in the painted area on NBA broadcast, like even if you've never heard of Hubie Brown, you go, that person is at least 80. And every time I hear him say it, okay, he's at least 81. Now he's probably 82 because it's just such a dusty, antiquated phrase. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. Or the NFL, the red area. Everyone says the red area. Yeah. But he ran for over 800 yards. Yeah. So I think there's an argument, and I totally understand why they're starting Jacoby Brissett, the offensive line issues and all this, and you want Drake Maye to be comfortable picking up pressures and all that. I totally understand why he's not starting the season. But I do think that if you just look at the skill set, Drake Maye actually gives you a better chance to compete in these games because he can make plays with his legs. He can extend plays. We saw the preseason game where he picked up the 17 yards, right? That's a play that, quite frankly, Jacoby Brissett does not have the ability to make. So I'm going with week 4 after a really rough start to the season for the Patriots, or excuse me, week 5, that would be, against the Dolphins. Get him out there for a home game. So that's my prediction. October 6th, Drake Maye, Patriots fans will be happy. I'm going to get myself, I can't decide yet if it's the baby blue jersey, the navy jersey, or the Stormtrooper white jersey. But I think I may just have to go with the Carolina blue. I got to get one of those jerseys for my background here because, I mean, UNC colors are awesome.
Yeah. Or if they ever bring the Bledsoe Blues back. I mean.
Oh, that would be sick.
Which I don't know if I got to break the news 2 years ago when they brought back the silver pants on Monday now. Or no. I said before that happened, they were available. Like they could actually use that. That was someone within the team told me, no, we can use them whenever we want. Weeks later, it happened on that Chicago Monday night game that no one wants to talk about for the pants. But I have to imagine if they wanted to make it happen, they could. So fingers crossed next year. Okay, I have 3 more bold predictions. I am going to take us back to negative town. But before we do that, I did an episode last month about how Patriots fans can survive year 1 of an NFL rebuild. And I'm embarrassed to say this, Brian, but I left one out. It's play Prize Picks. You can get through this season and win no matter how much the Patriots lose because it's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. And it's just you against the numbers. I'm telling you, I played this. They've helped me out, enrolled me. It is the simplest, easiest way to win money as you watch sports. You just pick more or you pick less on 2 or more player stat projections. That's it. And see if you win. It could be Pop Douglas for catches. And actually, I have some numbers here. And I'm going to do picks on Friday. So you can keep up with me every single week of the season. I want to do this with you, the Metric Man, right now. Here are some numbers available for Patriots fans or anyone else who wants to play Prize Picks looking ahead to Sunday's game against Cincinnati. Pop Douglas, 36.5 receiving yards. Brian, would you take more or less?
I'm taking more, man. He's going to get targeted like crazy.
Spoiler,
and they're going to be losing at some point, right?
Something similar on Friday. Okay, Jalen Polk, 28.5 receiving yards against Cincinnati, more or less.
I'm going to go less. Okay. Actually, no. Let me take that back. I'm going to go more.
Okay, 2 more. Last one. Jacoby Brissett, 32.5 pass attempts, more or less.
I'm going to say more because they're losing the game.
There you go. That's it. It's that simple. You just pick more or less with Prize Picks and then watch the winnings rolls in. So when you do this, you can win up to 100 times your money if you have as few as 4 correct picks. And Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform that gets you this: injury insurance. So if someone gets hurt, Pop Douglas, Jalen Polk, or Jacoby Brissett, and they're in your lineup is still intact even if they don't come back for the second half. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you deposit $5. Again, that's $50 when you deposit your first 5 with code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to get the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, there it is. Number 2, I promise, negative town. You ran through the schedule. I don't want to belabor this point. You and I talked about it on your pod, and you did this down. I think the Patriots are the last winless team in the NFL, and that means we get a couple easy teams off the board. The Vikings and Giants, who are also in this category, play each other week 1. So 2 of the other 10 worst teams in the league, one of those is going to have a win. The Panthers get the Saints. I screwed this up in your pod now, I'm realizing. Then they get the Chargers. Then they get the Raiders in weeks 1 through 3. So the Raiders or the Panthers is going to have a win within weeks 1 through 3. And then later the Panthers get Washington and Denver before Halloween. Meanwhile, the Patriots, we know, at Cincinnati, home Seattle, at the Jets, at the Niners, home Dolphins, home Texans, a little bit of a breather against Jacksonville. Oh, but you need to fly 5.5 hours to London and then come back and play the Jets again. I think they're at least 0-6 to start the year. I don't think that's particularly bold, but when you put it in the context of the last winless team standing in the league, and I maybe goes to 0-7, including that Jaguars game, and then 0-8 maybe with the Jets. Wherever it lands, they'll be the last winless team in the league.
You make a really good case there, and I really do think that if you look at the first 6 weeks of the season, their best chance to win a game is this Sunday against Cincinnati, right? Because weird things always happen in week 1. Cincinnati's defense was not good last season. And you also look at the fact that who the heck knows what's going to happen with this Jamar Chase situation. He's still, as we're recording right now, Callahan, he hasn't signed a contract, and who knows how much playing time he's going to get even if he is on the field. on Sunday. Not to mention Joe Burrow is coming off an injury situation, and historically Cincinnati starts slow. So if you don't beat Cincinnati in week 1, that slate I ran through the slate that they have to play, it's going to be awfully difficult for them not to be the last winless team. And then you really get into negative town when that comes, right? When it's like, wait, hold on, who? And you already had the Miami game that they're winning, but it's like, hey, are they going to win a game this year? Like when you start 0-6.
And I'm not going there. There are other folks who will, and I'll backtrack and put my stamp on this firmly. The other stuff is firm too, but just in a way to remind everyone, when you are playing Prize Picks or you're doing a pool or a survivor pool or your fantasy team or this and that, whatever, we know nothing. This is the NFL, where you watch to be surprised, to be thrilled, but we all go in at the start of every September. We know we're so certain, this seductress that is certainty about our pro sports, and we get smacked across the face and reminded, no, you know nothing. And this is what it's going to be, and it's a lot of fun. But the Patriots very well could win in Cincinnati. I just think on balance right now, the schedule where the offense is at, yada, yada, this is it. I'm going to go back to back because that was quick, and we're going to U-turn out of negative town, and I have a surprise Pro Bowl selection for you. But first, I'll let you guess, and the answer is not Mike White. Who do you think I'm about to nominate to their first Pro Bowl from this Patriots roster?
Has Peppers made a Pro Bowl?
Great guess, Brian Barrett. Yes. Brian Barrett. Jabril Peppers has never made a Pro Bowl. This year, that is changing. And let's start here. Last year in 15 games, this guy had 78 tackles, 2 interceptions, 8 pass breakups, a forced fumble, and a sack. He is in his physical prime. This is a dude who's always been jacked. His game is now jacked as well. He's in the right system. He's got an extension. He's a newly minted captain. If you extrapolate those numbers out for an extra 2 games, he just stays healthy this year. You were talking upwards of 90 tackles, perhaps 3 or 4 interceptions, and over 10 pass breakups with the forced fumble. Now let's do the ultimate argument here. Take all the real numbers out of my hands. Let's give you a fake number. 85. Brian, that is his Madden rating. And when you look at all of the safeties ranked ahead of him that are just in the AFC, because if Jabril Peppers makes the Pro Bowl, it will be as a member of the AFC. There are only 5 safeties rated higher than 85 in the game right now. And Derwin James is on this list, someone who I don't think has lived up to his reputation lately, as you would think. The other ones are Kyle Hamilton, Minkah Fitzpatrick, and Javon Holland. That's it. Real ones know, real Madden playing, ball watching, tape studying real ones know that Jabril Peppers is in his prime. So this also gets a bump from name recognition. Everyone's known Jabril since he was the number 1 recruit in the country, goes to Michigan, first round pick. He's healthy. He's productive. He's going to play on a good defense. And I think he's going to make his first Pro Bowl as a sack making, ball intercepting, tackle making, and then breaking on his returns. Safety. The best of Jabril Peppers is going to be a Pro Bowler at the end of the season.
I like it. He's fun to watch, too. By the way, you mentioned Kyle Hamilton. If he wasn't a safety, that would be a good pick for Defensive Player of the Year because that Ravens defense is so good and he's the best player on that defense. But I like it. I love Peppers. I mean, you look at all the stuff from last year, he was tremendous and he was better than Duggar. And I know Duggar last year had sort of a different role than he did the previous seasons, right? Where Jabril Peppers got to do a lot of the different type of stuff where he got to play more of the run game, where Duggar had to be back a little bit more and try to play more in the pass game. But I love Peppers as a player. I thought that was a tremendous pickup. When they signed him, I didn't know what to expect, but I thought he was awesome for the Patriots last year, and they deserve credit for that too. I hope he sticks around. Like, I mean, could that be a trade candidate if things go really south for the Patriots? And
No. He'll stay here. And I think too, he's got the sign off from the coaching staff, right? That he's a captain. And not in the way that they're rigging the vote or anything, though I'm sure that's happened or still happens in the NFL. It's just to say that, like, everyone in the building, front office, coaching staff, and locker room is behind him. So that's a dude who's, again, 28, got a few good years left in a good way, suited for the system, is going to carry the flag, say all the right things, play hard for Mayo, do all those. And so I don't think they're going to ship him out. And this is not, to be clear, because he came on the show last week and admitted to being a big softie and a romantic. This is just because my guy is making the Pro Bowl.
Yeah, and it's like their best position group, isn't it, with Duggar and Peppers? Like, you would like somewhere else to be your best position group, but it's a good position group. Feel good about that group.
It's going to be fun. All right, you get to go back to back.
This is another positive, okay? Ramondre gets back to being an elite back because he was in 2022. He wasn't in 2023. But I think we're starting to see that, right? Prior to the game, he got injured. 3 straight really good games, 50 carries for 273, so 5.5 yards per pop. You'll take that. That's an elite performance. But on the season, I was shocked by this number. Last year, he was minus 18 yards over expectation. That's a next gen stat. So that's
It was
sort of
under.
yeah, yes, he was worse.
Under
That's kind of
expectation.
yeah, like he was way on 18 yards under expectation because you go back to 2022, he's 118 yards over expectation, the 9th best mark in the entire NFL. So he went from being one of the best players in that category to well below average in that category. And furthermore, in 2022, he was one of only 6 running backs that was over 800 yards in terms of yards after contact. He was 6th, right behind Saquon Barkley. And if you just do the yards after contact per attempt, 3.81, which was the 3rd highest mark in the NFL. So he went from legitimately being one of the best running backs in the league from a per carry standpoint in terms of like he was creating this stuff, right? It wasn't because of his offensive line. It was because of the running back himself to a guy that was well below average. So I got to think there was something going. Remember last year, and correct me if I'm wrong in this, Callahan, but there was almost like this NBA sense of like load management after he wore down in 2022 where he wasn't doing a lot in training camp. He even said this year that he lost some weight. So I just, and I know like it's going to be a similar situation as it pertains to the line's not going to be good, but we've seen him when the line hasn't been opening up the biggest holes for him where he's been able to create for himself. So I have to believe, especially considering his age, it's not like he's old, right? He's still a relatively young back and he just got the contract extension. I think he gets back to being a really, really good back and a really effective player. And they're going to want to run the football a ton with Ramondre, considering Van Pelt's background. I'm not comparing him to Nick Chubb, but they gave the ball to Nick Chubb a ton. And you go back to 2 years ago, same yards per carry as Chubb, but Chubb had more than 90 carries more than him. I think Ramondre is going to have a huge season for the Patriots, even if it doesn't result in a lot of wins. I think Ramondre is going to be back to what we saw in 2022.
Yeah, and I think a couple things here too, right? Like we bemoan the offensive line for good reason. Most of those concerns, though, are related to pass protection. It's a whole different story with run blocking. I'm not saying they're even above average run blocking line, but you have to separate the two. And it's like, oh, the offensive line stinks. Oh my God, Vidarian Lowe, this, that, whatever you want to say. Like they ran the ball pretty well in preseason. They did an okay job enjoying practice against the Eagles. The other part is the schematic change to a Van Pelt offense, which we expect, and mostly how this changes, to more of an outside zone scheme. And they'll still mix and duo, and they'll run a little power and counter here and there. Is going to help Stevenson. This is his favorite scheme to run through and run behind and execute. So it's one cut and go. That's good for him. It's good for Gibson. You need the players still to block that, but it's something he did in Oklahoma. He's been talking about it since I think I asked him in the spring, and everyone's like, "Oh, you like the outside zone?" He's like, "Yeah, still do. So I like the case. I think the game. There's a better way to put this, but you know what I talk about. The circumstances, the game setting is really going to dictate though how much they can hand the ball off. Because you're behind by 10,
True,
like that in the second quarter, and they're splitting carries. It's going to be hard to keep handing the ball off to him.
Yeah, that's fair. In terms of like the raw yards, it may not be what we expect, but I think like on a per carry basis, he's still going to be a really effective running back. And I like Ramondre a lot, so I hope that he bounces back this year after what we saw last year. All right, so my last bold take, and this just came to me at about, I'd say, midnight last night, because we know how Talking Heads, Sports Talk Radio, we know how this works. Bill O'Brien is going to be a storyline. So the reason I say that is BC last night, as we're recording on Tuesday, on Monday night, just beat Florida State. Now, they have a good game or a tough game in a couple of weeks against an SEC opponent in Missouri, but they ran for 260 yards. They got a bunch of guys off that offensive line that look like they're big-time NFL prospects. And you look at Bill O'Brien, like he was 52-48 as an NFL head coach. And you look at Deshaun Watson, year 2, 2nd in passer rating, 7th in completion percentage. And he wasn't even considered for the job. Right? I mean, and remember, he wasn't even going to be the offensive coordinator for the Patriots. He took the job at Ohio State, right? Like Mayo was going to be the head coach of this team, right? I mean,
yeah, I think it's not as cut and dry there. Like Bill O'Brien, I think, was open in a way to staying, and I don't want any of this aggregated because I'm not speaking definitively. Like this is, I think, from what I recall at the time, he did take the Ohio State job quickly, right? And then pivoted and went back to BC. But I think was more of a solid name to consider or an option if he wanted to stay with the organization and work under Drake Maye, who I know some people did not feel very good about the way Mayo assumed power after Bill Belichick. We know Bill O'Brien is a Belichick loyalist, was maybe more of a consideration than Josh McDaniels, but I don't know if that necessarily means he was a legitimate candidate. So it's gray. And it didn't happen. But I'm interested by this take because obviously we're going to be talking about Belichick. But you're saying there's another Bill that's going to live with us, maybe not casting as large of a shadow, but he's down the street in a way that Belichick is not over the season.
Well, that's my point. So I'm not saying that, and I wasn't making this case like when the job opened up that Bill O'Brien should be the head coach of the Patriots. I'm not saying that, and I don't think a lot of people thought that at the time. The reason I'm bringing this up is it's like, if BC is back to being, and look, I'm doing this off one game, but if BC ends up being at least a competitive football team for the majority of the season, and they look like, hey, Bill O'Brien has Boston College back on track, and we start to think about it, we're like, wait, he was on the Patriots coaching staff, right? And if the Patriots have the season that we expect, then you start to think about, well, when he was with the Texans, it wasn't his coaching that was bad, right? It was his GMing. Like, he traded DeAndre Hopkins away, and it's like, well, what are you doing for a running back and like a third-round draft pick? Like, those decisions made no sense. But the fact that he's not coaching Georgia Tech, he's not coaching like Washington State, he's literally going to be coaching at Chestnut Hill, and we can look at it and say, whoa, Bill O'Brien's having this outstanding season. He was on the coaching staff. He developed a young quarterback in the NFL before. So just because of sort of the proximity that he's going to have to the Patriots, I do think that this is going to be a talking point that people are going to bring up that I had before last night. I had no expectations that was going to be the case. They were 16.5-point dogs, and they beat. And look, this Florida State team looks like they're completely fraudulent, right? But you get my point.
That's a huge note. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, Florida State lost to Georgia Tech too in the Week 0 game. But man, that was, and look, even if Florida State's not what they used to be, even last year where they had a chance to make it to the playoff prior to the injury to the quarterback. But if Bill O'Brien gets that thing back on track, I do think that it's going to be just an interesting thing to monitor. And they got a quarterback in Castellanos that can run the ball. I think they're going to be a pretty competitive football team. Like, so they took it to Florida State. They were mauling them from an offensive line perspective.
So a couple things on this, just to put the Florida State part to bed. Disastrous defensive performance. Like, that is a bad team. Never belonged in the top 10. Forget the DJU part that everyone's calling for him to be benched. He's on his third college team. He's never been that good. All true. BC was spamming the same pass concept, and Dan Mullen said this at halftime, mesh, which is good against man and zone. And you saw it a lot on those kind of wheel routes to the running backs. Mesh rail is what it's called when you use that particular route over and over and over again. And they could not, for the life of them, get any sort of switch man coverage or passing it off or reading of the same route combinations. So that defense stinks. The second part where I think what you're talking about, that Bill O'Brien will live with us this season and kind of be in the ether, where this will be most felt is behind closed doors, I think, if you're right. Because I think this is a really interesting take. In that BC, if the Patriots continue to be this bad, there's a good tweet by Zach Cox last night, BC will be more relevant than they've been maybe in 15, 20 years. If the Patriots play as we expect them to, and BC continues to ascend. And to your point, that attention stolen from the Patriots, given to someone who could have been in the building, to Bill O'Brien, will hurt most behind closed doors with the Crafts, who go, we can't fill our stadium. BC may or may not be, by this point, selling out. And the guy at the helm is someone we were close with, that we wanted to bring back and was here and let go out the door. Now, how does that manifest itself? Does it create any kind of rancor with the other coaches or people who replaced him? Who knows? This is all contingent upon stuff that has not happened yet. But I like where this is going because we're all going to be listening to Belichick on Monday with McAfee, Fridays with Peyton Manning, and Underdog Fantasy somewhere in between. Now Jim Gray's hanging out somewhere. I don't know. But Bill O'Brien is right down the street, and he is off to a scorching hot start, even if FSU sucks.
Well, and two small follow-ups to that. The first one is when they had the Matt Ryan year where at one point they were up to number 2 in the country. That was 2007, and the Patriots were going undefeated that year, right? So even the year that they were having, and I can't remember, they lost a Thursday night game where I think if they won that game, they were going to have a real chance to like make it. It could have been UCF or something, or maybe UCF was number 2 and they beat them. But I just remember they lost a game at the end of the season where they legitimately had a chance. Like, remember that 07 year was so weird where LSU won the title, and this is before even the 14 playoff. LSU won the title when they had 2 losses. It was just a weird year. Even like West Virginia, they ended up losing to, when they had Pat White, they lost to LaShawn McCoy at the end of the season. So it was like, who is going to get into the national championship? It ended up being LSU beat Ohio State. But my point with that is, this year, the Patriots are not going undefeated, and Tom Brady's not the quarterback, and they don't have Randy Moss and Welker, and the greatest offense at that time that we had ever seen. This is going to be an irrelevant Patriots team from a national perspective, so BC should get some attention there. And to your point about the Crafts, they wanted him back to be the OC last year, right? Like that was their choice too, right? Not just Belichick's choice.
Yes, I think they were happy to have that. I know O'Brien has a good relationship with the Crafts, and I think also if you're Mayo, part of the consideration of like who's on your list, who do you want back? Does Bill O'Brien even want to be back? All kind of TBD. And I might be missing a report. This could have been documented at the time in a number of places, but it's a long way since January. We've been basically have not stopped since. Is to say you don't want to worry about the internal politics in a way that even Belichick, according to Seth Wickersham's book, It's Better to Be Feared, was with O'Brien and kind of sidling up to ownership. So even if you're Gerard Mayo, anointed head coach a year before you're actually hired and played for the Crafts and now coach for them and feel secure, you just don't want anything undermining you because you know you're going to grow and have some wobbly moments. Belichick didn't want that. And who knows if Bill O'Brien actually would have politicked in a way. But like that's something else to consider here. So I think the relationship part with ownership is good. There's just a lot of stuff that I don't think has been fully fleshed out, but you get little hints or pockets or whispers or rumblings of that kind of all went into that before Bill O'Brien left, and now he's back.
Yeah.
right down the street.
And think about it from this perspective. If Bill O'Brien was the offensive coordinator, what would his title have been? Because Van Pelt's the head coach of the offense. Would he have been the senior head coach of the offense? Because he used to be a coach, like you'd have to give him an even better title, not just head coach of the offense.
One of those like strange titles you hear at Stanford or Michigan where the big donor family pays to be like the Wilson family offensive coordinator at the University of Michigan. It would have been like the Matt Patricia Memorial offensive coordinator of the New England Patriots.
Geez, Patricia.
Yeah. Anyway, good stuff. All right. I have one more, but before that, I know you are at home on Sundays because you have to watch Patriots. You have to watch other stuff. You have to record a podcast. But the only thing better than doing what Brian does, and what you would probably at home do as well, 8 hours on the couch watching the NFL, is to go to a game. And you know I've been after you. Come on down to Gillette. Come in, soak it in, because there's no better place on Sundays to be than an NFL stadium. And you can go there with Game Time. I've been to almost every single Patriots game the last 7 years. True story. Before most games. I take a walk around the concourse. I like to feel the crowd. I like to sense the energy, smell the food, the vibes. There's nothing like a live atmosphere. So right now I'm looking at the Patriots home opener against Seattle. Miami's coming in early October. So is Houston, the Jets right before Halloween. And I've already told you the Patriots are going to beat a playoff team this year. So you should be there. Go to Game Time with the lowest price guarantee where they can credit you 110% of the difference if you find a lower ticket price elsewhere. Not to mention at Game Time, they do all-in pricing. So what you see is what you pay for. No more pesky fees down at the very end, and especially not with Game Time Picks, which filters out all of the fluff just to get you incredible deals and great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets and sites and fees and yada yada. Just download the Game Time app today and come on down to Gillette or any NFL or any college game, maybe BC, that you want to go to this year. And here's the best part. With code CLNS, you get $20. $20 free off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, just create an account and download the Game Time app and use code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, my last one. There's going to be a coaching change before the season's over. And I don't mean this in a, Gerard Mayo's fired. I mean, things are going to get real stressful in Foxborough. And there's going to be a blame game. There's going to be some kind of strife. And we have to remember this offensive staff is massive. So I don't even think it'll be a coordinator. But I'm looking at 3 offensive line coaches right now for a group that's going to struggle. I'm going to look at Tyler Hughes, the receivers coach, one of the last hire assistants on this staff, who's got a backup available in Taekwon Underwood if they want to make a change. There's a lot riding on Pop Douglas and Jalen Polk and Javon Baker. Or Ben McAdoo might just leave for another job. If he goes, we're 2-14, and one of my buddies just got fired, and I'm already going to go anyway, I'll just skip the finale or go to college or wherever it might be. There's just a lot that's going to happen that we anticipate to be bad, and that drags down a whole team in a locker room and a staff. And even Drake Maye said, I don't know if it was introductory press conference or shortly thereafter, a head coach's first staff typically does not look a whole like his staffs in the coming years. So again, this is not saying he's going anywhere or even AVP, but because of the size of the staff and the lack of familiarity and the available backups in case they do suddenly want to part with, hell, throw TC McCartney in there as the quarterback's coach. And we're not rooting for any of this, but I think at some point before the season is over, we're going to be asking Drake Maye, what made this decision to let so-and-so walk or fire them in the best interest of the team? Because that amount of losing and stress is going to trigger someone to go, we got to change things up. And it's not going to be the players or any of the rookies who go. And I don't think the highest coaches, but someone down below them who will be a buffer to year 2 hot seat for Mayo. Well, he's not going to go year 2, but AVP might. And I think this will be the first step towards that if we get there even next season.
Yeah, it's a fair point, especially considering the win total right now is at 4.5. And if you finish under that, you would expect that which I do, by the way, if the offense is really bad, then maybe you're saying, hey, we're still going to keep Alex Van Pelt as our offensive coordinator. But hey, if we can go back to this whole Shanahan-McVay coaching tree and somebody becomes available, say, from another team that is an offensive coordinator in name only, right, where they're not actually calling the plays, maybe that's something they entertain bringing over as sort of like and I know it's difficult in terms of the NFL language, but maybe there's some way that they can bring in somebody else to bring just more elements to the offense, especially considering we know like the Shanahan-McVay offense, it works all over the NFL. So you would think that maybe you can get somebody in here with that sort of pedigree and that type of background to help out with the offense in some way, shape, or form. But if you finish with 2 wins or 3 wins, there's going to be some changes on the coaching staff, even if it's not like, as you said, not something as dramatic as a coordinator or the head coach. Ordinarily, when that happens, there's big changes that happen with the organization.
Yeah, and I'll say too, the Patriots lost coaches last year because assistants didn't know where this was going. Like their receivers coach, Ross Douglas, went to Syracuse. You lost a defense.
Well, that's in fairness. I mean, that's a great choice. I mean, they just beat Ohio this weekend.
Yeah. Oh, congrats! I can't wait for the parade down this gray ass Syracuse, whatever their main drag is.
Kyle McCord, man. Ohio. Kyle McCord, Ohio State quarterback, ripping it up, 364 yards.
That is enough on this UConn podcast about Syracuse. But they also lost, I want to say D'Angelo Bentley, and I might be butchering the name. He was a QC on defense. Left before the season was over. Everyone knew where this was going. And so offensively, you're going to play the blame game. And I mentioned 3 offensive line coaches. Let me clear that up. Scott Peters is the offensive line coach. Robert Kugler is his assistant. Michael McCarthy is an offensive assistant. Who was at Brown mostly the last 4 or 5 years. He's also working with the offensive line, has some NFL experience. But that's what I mean by 3 offensive line coaches. Just areas where there's a lot going on. Maybe McCarthy's done or it's not working out, goes back to college. Who knows? I just think there will be change before we have an end of season press conference. All right. Anything else? Did you have any outside looking in stuff you left on the cutting room floor? Too spicy, not spicy enough that you were thinking about before firing off those 4 bold predictions?
Yeah, well, one thing, and I mentioned this briefly on my pod to you, but one thing that I was going to put in here, but I didn't know if it would have qualified as bold, is that Kendrick Bourne would be traded just because they're going to want to see what they have in the young guys. Like Douglas is obviously going to be a feature part of this offense in the slot, and then you spent a 2nd-round pick on Jalen Pope. Like you want to get him a lot of opportunities, and I know they have Tyquan Thornton out there as sort of the deep threat. Like it's not like Kendrick Bourne is not that type of player. And I think Kendrick Bourne's on a really good contract, still young enough where if there's a contender that needs sort of a 3rd receiver to add to their group, Kendrick Bourne's a really good player. I mean, we saw 2021, the guy had 800 yards and it was not like he was targeted a ton. I mean, you go back to last season, he had a bunch of big games prior to the injury. Like I think if Kendrick Bourne plays
to match that total, because if I hear you say that, it's like, okay, that was 3 years ago. Well, he would have gotten there had he stayed healthy. Right. And this is not a guy who's been, dinged up over the course of his career, been injury prone. Like it's just he didn't get there because he tore his ACL.
Well, and the reason for that too is like 2022, it wasn't his fault he wasn't productive. He was in Patricia's doghouse, right? It made no sense. Like they were too punitive. He missed the start of a team meeting for a preseason game and had a bad training camp and eventually got out of it, but like was still more productive than Tyquan Thornton, who had more snaps than him that year. So yeah, he earned part of it, no question about it. But the coaching staff was wagging their finger well past it should have been. Okay, time to get you in. You need to play. You're one of our best receivers. Yeah, well, remember they put him in and he had that huge game. I think he had over 100 yards when they finally like, oh, we got to play the Kendrick Bourne guy because somebody else is dealing with an injury. And then last year, I think if he plays the whole season, he's not a member of the Patriots. I think somebody offers him obviously more money than he's making, and he goes to a better team that maybe is a contender. So I think that just because of the situation, like if you were a contending team, there'd be no reason to trade Kendrick Bourne because he's a solid player. And I think when he comes back, he's going to be a contributor. But I just think based on the fact that you have all these young receivers on the team that you're going to want to get, and it makes sense. Like it behooves the Patriots to get a lot of reps with these young guys because obviously they're going to have a young quarterback and they want to see what they have going forward into next year's draft. Oh, and one other thing I thought that we would be talking about, like, what is the offer going to be like for the number 1 pick? Because if the Patriots end up with the worst record, and if a team really wants a quarterback there, like depending on how it's kind of weird. Like the quarterback situation at the college level, see, I said college this time, is up in the air. Like who's going to be the number 1 pick, right? Like we'll see like if Cam Ward has a big year, does he get into the discussion as I mentioned earlier? But Quinn Ewers is there, Shedeur Sanders is there. We'll see who the number 1 pick is like in the draft. But if somebody becomes the clear-cut number 1, and remember, like it doesn't always happen where we know before the season. And I'm not saying anybody's going to be this player, but remember in 2019, nobody thought Joe Burrow was going to be the number 1 pick. And then he had this crazy season where he led LSU to a national championship and he became that number 1 pick. So if something happens along those lines, you could be like,
or Jaden Daniels last year, like that was supposed to be Caleb Williams and those boys, or Caleb Williams and Drake Maye and their boys. And thankfully for the Patriots, it got to be a 3 quarterback, maybe 4 if you include JJ McCarthy or Nix or whomever draft. Like that was a huge help to them. That was franchise changing.
Yeah, so they could be looking at, we could be talking about by the end of the season, hey man, the Patriots get a haul for this number 1 pick, or they could stay at number 1 and pick whoever they think is the best player. And I know there's like whoever it is, whether it's Travis Hunter or somebody else, right? Whether it's the best lineman, the best of whoever it is, the best defensive player, whoever. Like I think that, and I know this like sounds bad to say, but it really does help the Patriots to have the worst record this year because then you're in complete control of the draft.
Oh, it's true. Brian Barrett starting on a high note. The defense is not going to be that good. Ending on a high note. Please root for them to lose. You can listen to him. The Off the Pike podcast. He's right. He's not wrong. And you were bold today, which is what we asked of you, and I really appreciate it. I love listening. Find him at The Ringer, again, the Off the Pike podcast. I'm glad we got to do the home and home, and we'll check in sometime, I think, later on in the season. But if you do end up coming to Gillette, I know that was a Game Time read, and Game Time has been great to us, and I've used them to go to Sox games and other places. But if you come on down to Gillette one of these days, let me know. We'll hook you up, all right?
Will do, Colin.